Happy Mother's Day. I'm thrilled to have you with us today, this May 10th, day 57, I think it is, of our shelter in place. Whether you have mothered your own children or you have mothered some other creative endeavor in your life, we celebrate you. Because for me, Mother's Day is all about creation. It's all about the midwifing that it happens by means of us. And so Mother's Day is actually a perfect integration with this month's theme, which is listen to your heart, which also happens to be the talk topic as well. And so we're going to be looking at really listening to your heart and the alchemy that happens when we listen to our heart. And so I want to start just with a brief blessing and a prayer and an invocation for a time together. And so know with me that we have come together to be in the heart of love, the heart of wisdom, the heart of the universe that moves in, as, and through each one of us. And so I know as we move together through this WisdomCast, through all that comes forward, that we are all nourished and fed and cherished as spiritual community. And so I give great thanks for this. And so it is. And so it is. And so listening to your heart is what we're talking about today. And I think that when we think about mother energy, we often associate it with the heart, don't we? So while we're appreciating biological mothers everywhere, I want to look at this metaphor of mother and birth in a larger perspective and in a more global, reflective way. And if I look around at the world and I see what's going on for us right now, because while we're 2 months or better into this thing called pandemic and COVID-19, I don't know about you, but there's this strange thing that's happening where I don't want to say I'm getting used to it. Let's just say I'm getting accustomed to it. And it's kind of disturbing to me that I'm getting accustomed to being apart from you. And so when I look around the world at what's going on, what I find is that all of us are moving in and out of various stages of either being okay or being really upset or somewhere in between. And if I were to liken that to this metaphor of giving birth and mother, I would call it labor. For those of you who haven't had to go through labor, it comes in waves. The contractions come in waves. And so what we're moving through right now is this thing that is happening in our world that is giving birth to something greater. And that something greater, I think, is a new future. And what I know about birth is it's messy, and this thing that the world is going through, this labor process that we're going through is it's messy. It's messy like birth. And so earlier I shared that Mother's Day blessing from the Rumi poem where and I can bring it up real quick for you, again, for those of you who joined us a little late. Every midwife knows that until a mother's womb softens from the pain of labor, not until a mother's womb softens from the pain of labor will a way unfold and the infant find the opening to be born. O friend, there is a treasure in your heart. It is heavy with child. Listen. All the awakened ones, like trusted midwives, are saying, welcome this pain. It opens the dark passage of grace. We're in the midst of it, aren't we? We're in the midst of something that is trying to give birth and give way in our society right now. And so what I know for us is that while many of us are doing fine, we're moving through things like waves. And I when I try to take the pulse on what's going on out there in the world, I see all of us, including myself, are moving through waves of emotion and waves of not being okay and waves of being okay, and maybe even waves of numbness. There's a great book by Matt Kahn called Whatever Arises, Love That. And what I think about is that oftentimes when the, I'll call it the unlovely things come up, we're tempted to not to want to either comfort or to make them all better or to tamp them all down, and and honestly what love wants is to just sit with us, to sit with us in our discomfort, to sit with us in our pain, like a midwife. The midwife doesn't try to stop the contractions. She simply makes a safe space for them to come through, and she sits with us so that we can give birth to the yet to be born that we're working with. And I think our world, that's what's happening with our world. So I think about the heart as not only is the heart the great alchemist, but it's also the great midwife to help us midwife what it is that wants to come through us. And in order for us to really be present with that, I want to talk about empathy. And I think empathy is um, one of those vehicles of the heart. Brene Brown talks about empathy better than almost anybody I know, and in her book Dare to Lead, she tells this story, and it's on the surface, it really doesn't look like a big deal. She's orchestrated everything. She has to go out of town. Those of you who've read the book might remember the story. She has to go out of town for a presentation with one of her co-leaders, and they do the presentation. She's got it all mapped out because she wants to get back to Dallas, where she lives, or I think it's Houston, actually. Houston, where she lives, because her daughter's got a big event that night. And she's got it down to the hour and a half. If they get to the airport an hour and a half before the plane is supposed to depart, everything's working out beautifully, and then suddenly they cancel her flight. She's devastated. She's absolutely devastated. She begins crying like a baby. It's like real sobbing. And her co-leader, the woman that she was traveling with, sits with her, and she doesn't try to make it all better. She doesn't try to comfort her so that and alleviate her some suffering. Instead, she sits with her and she acknowledges the pain that she's in. And Brene says that this is the power of empathy, not to try to um, make things go away. Empathy is being strong enough to witness and hold each other when we're suffering. And when I think about mothering in connection with empathy, I think sometimes mothering gets confused with smothering, right? I've done it myself. If we could just witness each other when we're suffering and have the courage to sit with someone else's pain, that is power. That is courage. That is the empathy. Brene, to quote her in her book, she puts it this way: it's not our job to make things better. It's our job to connect, to take the perspective of someone else. Empathy is not connecting to the experience, it's connecting to the emotions that underpin an experience. And so when we can relate to someone, not in a kind of a competition, not in a comparative way, but to see that somebody's in pain and then to be with them in that pain. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do as a parent is to let my children suffer. There are things that I have had to not do that were required in a moment, and there were things that I had to do that I would say, how do I put it, that my children didn't appreciate. And I'm sure that I didn't navigate them with the grace I would have liked to, but I know that there are times when suffering has to be moved through. We have to move through it to get to the other side. And so while the world is navigating this rebirth of newness, honestly, it's like being in the mother's womb, and it requires the alchemy of our hearts to move through this. There's a great analogy of operating systems. If you think about a computer that has an operating system, and I know not all of you are computer people, so hang with me here as I talk about this. So when you think about the computer, it has an operating system, and then the operating system has programs that it works from. And much of the world has been operating from an egoic, dualistic operating system. And that operating system is an operating system of either or algorithm, or perhaps the us versus them, right versus wrong, very dualistic. And you see it really bubbling up to the surface right now as people are really frustrated of there's, we're all being asked to stay home. We're all being asked to come apart, and so we're coming apart from one another, and some of us are coming apart. I know I've had my days. And so as we move through this transition time and we look at this old operating system, I want to believe that humanity is moving through an upgrade, if you will, to a new operating system that's heart-centered, that's unitive. And the programs that we used to run from the egoic operating system of competition and comparison and us versus them, my way versus your way, those operating systems are not going to work anymore with this new upgraded operating system. And so we have to let go of the old programs as well as upgrade to working with the heart as we move through these times. Kabir Helminski, who is the current leader of the Sufi movement worldwide, writes this: "We have subtle subconscious faculties we are not using. Beyond the limited analytical intellect is a vast realm of mind that includes psychic and extrasensory abilities, intuition, wisdom, a sense of unity, aesthetic, qualitative, and creative faculties, and image forming and symbolic capacities. Though these faculties are many, we give them a single name with some justification, just because they are operating best when they work together, when they're in concert. They comprise a mind, moreover, in spontaneous connection with the cosmic mind, the total mind we call the heart." So I think in our culture, we refer to the heart, we think of, hearts, and we think of romance, and we think of love, but the heart is so much bigger than that. The wisdom of the heart and the eye of the heart is the culmination of body, mind, and spirit. It's the culmination where the soul lives. The author, the book I'm reading from is called Wisdom Jesus. I was turned on to it by Moira Fox, who is an amazing New Thought minister down in Redondo Beach. But the book is written by Cynthia Bergault. And she goes on to write, "The heart can pick up subtle signals from all levels of reality, not just from what's happening in the rational. The intellect is part of it, you notice. But the field of perception goes far beyond just the rational. The heart picks up from the emotions, from our sense of proportion, from intuition, from images and archetypes, and most important, it keeps us aligned with our innermost, with what we truly know." So the heart brings us back to that innate intelligence that is the intelligence and the wisdom of our beingness. It operates on a whole nother level. It integrates the ego in such a way that it dissolves our sense of separation and moves us to a sense of, as Emma Curtis Hopkins refers to it, as no sense of otherness. So we've talked about the world being in labor. We've looked at this idea of empathy and how we can be with one another, to really sit with whatever's coming up, to have courage to do it. And so what is the next thing that we do? Well, one of our books of the month is 7,000 Ways to Listen by Mark Nepo, and he has a passage in there that he refers to something called the still point. That place between thoughts and our actions and reactions, where we can learn to pause and navigate whatever is coming up, so that we can be still enough to hear the wisdom of the heart. The heart knows love, the heart knows compassion, the heart knows empathy. And this love isn't there, this powerful alchemy isn't there to make it go away or try to smooth things over, but to move us through it to what wants to be experienced and birthed through us. And many of us just revert to those old programs. We just revert to that old operating system. And then we have this experience of divisiveness. I'm seeing it everywhere. There's great outrage and disdain, and there's hatred that's bubbling up. What I know is that there is a place where, how do I say it? While there are behaviors out there that are completely unacceptable, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that we accept them, there is a place where, as the wisdom teacher Jesus said, we reject the sin and love the sinner. For our purposes, sin refers to missing the mark. And yes, I would agree with you. Many of us are missing the mark by miles. But hatred only begets more hatred. And so when we lean into this place of the alchemy of the wisdom of the heart and begin to really listen to our heart, the payoff is huge. David Corton writes, "This is an unprecedented opportunity to rethink how our beliefs, values, and institutions shape our relationships. We can create a world that works for everyone, or face a future that no longer works for anyone." There's an old Irish story about a man who's lost in the countryside, and he stops an old farmer to ask him for directions, and the old farmer thinks for a minute, and he looks down one road and he looks down the other road, and he simply looks at the fella and says, "You can't get there from here." And my friends, we cannot get to the future that we all know is possible from where we are. And so we have this amazing thing called COVID-19 that is causing us to stop and to look within, not outside, not down, not to try to figure out what road we have to take or what strategy we have to take, but to come back in to the wisdom of the heart. And it's kind of like the miracle of gestation and birth. We are only the vehicles for this newness. We do not have to figure it all out, but we do have to make ourselves available to it. Kathy Ann Lewis, who's a wonderful New Thought leader up in Seattle, Washington, wrote this really terrific poem, and she fashioned it after Cabran's On Children, but she calls it "Speak to Us of Parents." Your parents are not your parents. They are the channels through which life recreated itself. You came through them, but not from them. And though they may still be with you, you do not belong to them. You may receive their love, but not their thoughts, for their thoughts are from their time. New thoughts must be generated within you now, for this time in this place. For life does not go backwards or become trapped in yesterday. You are the product of generation upon generations of humankind longing to give their children a better life than they have had. You have done nothing by yourself, even if it may have seemed so. for the prayers and petitions of millions of mothers crying out to the infinite to bless and protect their children have been heaped upon you. And the pride and the faith of millions of fathers in their offspring continues to inspire you at a deep cellular level. Don't let their prayers and faith be in vain. Receive with humble acceptance the blessing of the ancients, and then be sure to pass it on. We can receive our blessings and say our prayers and seek the still point where the intellect is used and purified by the heart. And from this place, we'll participate in the rebirth of humanity. And so I'd like to close with this video, and it's a bedtime story. Some of you may have seen it, but I think it's perfect for the capstone of this discussion this morning. And so it takes place in some far off future, looking back on these COVID-19 days that we navigated so beautifully. Enjoy.
Tell me the one about the virus again, then I'll go to bed.
But my boy, you're growing weary, sleepy thoughts about your head.
Please, that one's my favourite. I promise just once more.
Okay, snuggle down, my boy, though I know you know full well. The story starts before then, in a world I once would dwell. It was a world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty, back before we understood why hindsight's 2020. You see, the people came up with companies to trade across all lands, but they swelled and got much bigger than we ever could have planned. We'd always had our wants, but now it got so quick. You could have anything you dreamed of in a day, and with a click. We noticed families had stopped talking. That's not to say they never spoke, but the meaning must have melted, and the work-life balance broke. And the children's eyes grew squarer, and every toddler had a phone. They filtered out the imperfections, but amidst the noise, they felt alone. And every day the skies grew thicker, till you couldn't see the stars. So we flew in planes to find them, while down below, we filled our cars. We'd drive around all day in circles. We'd forgotten how to run. We swapped the grass for tarmac, shrunk the parks till there were none. We filled the sea with plastic, because our waste was never capped, until each day when you went fishing, you'd pull them out, already wrapped. And while we drank and smoked and gambled, our leaders taught us why. It's best to not upset the lobbies. More convenient to die. But then in 2020, a new virus came our way. The governments reacted and told us all to hide away. But while we all were hidden, amidst the fear and all the while, the people dusted off their instincts. They remembered how to smile. They started clapping to say thank you and calling up their mums. And while the car keys gathered dust, they would look forward to their runs. And with the skies less full of voyagers, the earth began to breathe, and the beaches bore new wildlife that scuttled off into the seas. Some people started dancing, some were singing, some were baking. We'd grown so used to bad news, but some good news was in the making. And so when we found the cure, and were allowed to go outside, we all preferred the world we found to the one we'd left behind. Old habits became extinct, and they made way for the new, and every simple act of kindness was now given its due.
But why did it take a virus to bring the people back together?
Well, sometimes you've got to get sick, my boy, before you start feeling better. Now lie down and dream of tomorrow, and all the things that we can do. And who knows, if you dream hard enough, maybe some of them will come true. We now call it the Great Realization. And yes, since then there have been many. But that's the story of how it started, and why hindsight's 2020.
Because if you look at the camera, They know someone's filming it
Exactly.
because they can see you.
Exactly. If you look at the camera, they know someone's filming it. Okay, lie back down.
Wait, can I just practice right now?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I was just trying to relive the best bits of my day. Cheers.
Well, thank you for joining me for this morning. And so we like to end all of our Sunday talk and sharing with prayer. So join me in this affirmative prayer, please. And so I invite you to close your eyes or lower your gaze and simply know that we truly are the alchemist of today, that it is the heart that will guide us forward, that will lead the way as we move through uncertainty, as we move through complexity, as we move through ambiguity, as we move through challenging times. It is the heart that leads the way, that sheds the light, that allows us to move forward, to take each step, as uncertain as it is, into this future, this world we know is possible. And so we simply hold that beautiful ideal within our heart. We allow our heart to purify us and to purify that beautiful possible future so that we are guided, guarded, and directed. And so I know for each person who is listening to this prayer that there is a deep embrace that is happening in your life right now, that you are indeed held in love, and that at the core of your being, there is a place that knows. There is a place that has never known hardship, that has never known heartbreak. And so I know for each one of us that we draw upon that inner strength, that place within us that always knows. And so I know that we are each sourced so beautifully with everything we need right within our own heart, within our own body temple. And so I claim right now that ability for each one of us to go within and to tap into this true power, the power that is beyond the definition of power that is defined as the world outside of us, and instead is defined by the heart. And so I know that each one simply surrenders, and that this is the most powerful place that we can stand. And so I celebrate this day with each one of you, knowing that we are cared for. We are cared for by the Divine Mother, and that we are shepherded forward from a power that comes from within, and that we choose to trust it. We choose to be guided by it. We choose a future we all know is possible. And for this, I give great thanks. And together we anchor this prayer in power and in love by saying together, and so it is.